There's a smile on my face. If you're watching, you can see it. If you're listening, oh, you can probably hear it. You can feel it. Look, any given year, we have to go from January all the way through late August or early September before we get any football games. That's just the way that we have to live, even though we don't do the off season. We have seasons with games and seasons where we talk about the games to come. But then you throw in an election year and you've got all this other mess around, and never are you more starved for an escape from it than these moments. And so I look at our show and I say, Colin, Jesse, bar the doors, get Bradley to stand guard outside. Don't let any of it in here. It's just college football. That's it. That's all it'll ever be. And lets you know what we can't toast, but we can paper pop to that. We're jam-packed high atop a very toasty downtown Nashville, Tennessee, about 148 degrees today. Celsius, Fahrenheit, I don't know. What's the difference at that point? We got a jam-packed show, though. August is going to be jam-packed. I'll talk to you about that in a second. Fall camp questions. You know, it's whispers and intel season. And they're still in the acclimation period right now, unless you're like Florida State or Georgia Tech. But everywhere around the country, I would say by Sunday, actually, by the Sunday show, we'll have real, like, hardcore, honest-to-God whispers and intel, scoop, nuggets, whatever you want to call it, from fall camps. And that's really where the rubber meets the road. I got some unpredictable teams that I want to talk to you about tonight. We're going full prediction mode on two teams, Ohio State and Florida State. Showed you the JP poll last week, but we're going to go specific teams. I'm going to do several of these per episode. You guys know, if you've been around for a while, you know what our normal protocol in August is. And if you're new around here, thank you for joining us. Thank you for enrolling at Pate State. Our standards are low enough where everyone could get in. And you'll learn as the month goes on that August is the time to check back in if you haven't been already. Got bold predictions on the show, got what-ifs on the show. They're watching us in Omaha, Nebraska, Charlotte, North Carolina, San Diego, California, and Hoboken, New Jersey. Listen to me. I say that as nicely as I can. August around here is going to be wild. We got a tour name. I have settled on a tour name. It's going to drop in August, obviously. We have got gas station recruiting wars. I can say nothing more than there will be action coming on that very soon. That's part of the smile. We have got the Pate State store reopening in August. Yes, a lot of you asked about that. That's coming. I have got probably something bigger than all of those things that's going to happen to all of us in August. Ramen Noodle Express comes back in August. Friday Night Lines comes back in August. What an August. And then we get the actual football season. So check in, strap in, bring 10 of your friends if they're not here already, if they're complaining about the lack of quality college football content out there. Well, this is where it is, not exclusively. Saw a lot of our friends getting new deals at different companies today. Congrats to all of you guys. I didn't want to name you because I don't have an exhaustive list in front of me, but congrats. But, you know, we take pride in what we do here, too. So just bring them along. Just let them sample the show. All right, fall camp. So here's the way it's going to work. Daniel Cannell, a text message. Should know full well I'm on air right now. In August, every show from this point forward, I will lead the show with the stuff that we're hearing on the ground from fall camps. And some of them I'll be at, and at that point I can't tell you a whole lot. But others we get intel from. It's probably actually a better idea to have us at fall camp because I'll keep my mouth shut more if I'm there than if I'm not there. But this portion of the show, I'll lead it with as good a scoop as I can get for you. Whispers, intel, stuff that matters if you bet on it, stuff that matters if you don't bet on it and you just love college football. Tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip through and I'm going to tell you a lot of what I have my eye on. I know you've picked up your preview magazines and you've gotten your digital previews and stuff like that, and you got your own ideas. Here's where my head's at on several teams here. I got 10 of them. I'm going to go pretty quick through these. So, Clemson. What I'm watching for them this fall camp is I'm watching offensive synergy. Yeah, Cade Klubnik coming back another year in Garrett Riley's system. Everybody's focused on that. I am too. They need to take care of the ball better. They killed themselves with turnovers last year. They were out of this thing for all intents and purposes by like week 3 or week 4 last year. They got to show up in big games. Cade Klubnik has to show up in big games. I think they've got a better wide receiver unit. Some of that young wide receiver talent is better than anything they've had there in a while. That offensive line needs a jump. It was average last year. Needs a jump. Clemson could either be a team that regresses again, or they could literally win the ACC, and a lot of it will come down to offensive synergy. Next up, how quick was that, Jesse? Was that under a minute? I challenged myself to do all these under a minute. We'll see if I can. LSU, is that defense going to improve? Now, we could go all three levels, but specifically, you look at Blake Baker, new defensive coordinator. You look at Kevin Peoples, Bo Davis. I added so many quality defensive coaches. Will the level of play increase like the level of coaching staff increase defensively? They're very green in the secondary. Now, I know very early on we're going to get some good reports from down there. I'm worried about depth, I'm worried about longevity, and I'm worried about consistency, because you can play good 8 times out of 10 and still get beat by 2 touchdowns because the 2 blown plays went 80 yards to the house. Competitive depth is another thing that they've got to develop. Defensive front, secondary. LSU, man, if that over-under win total is 9.5, that means odds makers are confident you've got it. We'll see if they've got it. Next up, when we were at Big Ten Media Days a couple of weeks ago, we had Kurt Ferentz on the show. Well, we interviewed him. We didn't have him on the show, but we interviewed him. And so the thing I'm watching with Iowa, of course, is the offense, but how much underground hype will we feel start to build in? Because if there's something really happening, you normally feel it start to bubble up in fall camp. Tim Lester's the new offensive coordinator there. Tim Lester has an offensive line that needs to be better. That's kind of one of the secret overlooked components of Iowa's underachievement offensively, is their offensive line hasn't even played to the level it should be. Now, that's one thing that they should have the market cornered on up there, is quality O-line play. They haven't had that. They've got 166 starts returning on that unit. And so whoever plays quarterback there, I got a new OC. If that offensive line is up to the task, well, then we can start to build a foundation. Top 60 unit? Can they be that good? Because if they are, they're a dark horse playoff contender. Because elsewhere, Iowa's a really solid football program. Down at Miami, where would you go here? I saw earlier today, I saw that Cam Ward got preseason All-ACC Player of the Year. Colin and Jesse, did you see that? How about that? And what I loved about Cam Ward getting preseason All-ACC Player of the Year is everyone was really mature about it. Everyone handled it great. A guy who's never taken a snap in the conference, who transferred from across the country with a ton of NIL hype, he's the preseason Player of the Year. From Tallahassee to Clemson and everywhere in between, people just, they tipped their cap and they said, congrats, Cam. At least that's what I saw. Far be it for those fan bases to handle it any differently. I'd be irate if I were you guys. But nevertheless, that's not what I want to talk about with Miami. At Miami, there's going to be a lot of hype around Cam Ward. Should be. Big-time quarterback. I think he'll pan out. I think Cam Ward will be a dynamic playmaker for them. How many points is he going to need to put up per game? Because the secondary is what I'm watching very closely in Miami's fall camp. They're unproven at safety, had a good duo there. They're both gone. That sophomore class made some noise last year. A sophomore class this year, second-year class this year. They will be woven all throughout the 2 deep. A lot of them will start. And then that true freshman class coming in, along with those transfers. That'll be more and more and more as the weeks go on, the critical and majority makeup of Miami's roster. It'll be Mario's guys. That's all you could want. If you believe in your process as a head coach, you bring in your guys, you infuse them into the roster. Now you got to go win with them. Next up, Oklahoma. It's very clear that offensive line is the question at Oklahoma. It's the focus as we go into fall camp. They had 9 offensive line departures. They had 7 of those guys who had started. 196 games started on the offensive line, gone. Okay? That doesn't mean that it has to be a weakness. It does mean it's a glaring question that could become a weakness. Hickson at center, I think, is okay. Questions at both guard positions. There's this quiet confidence amongst the Oklahoma people about the tackles, but there's not proven production there. And so if they can be better than expected, then that unlocks all the potential of Jackson Arnold at quarterback. That, of course, unlocks the potential, and its sizable potential, of that wide receiver core. You're bringing Deion Burks. Guy could just explode, could be one of the all-SEC caliber players that people who don't follow the portal never saw coming. Got to have that offensive line in order. The next team that I'm focused on is one that we were close with last week at Big Ten Media Days, Michigan. Do we get consistency? Do we get dependability in the passing game? Now, that's before I even ask the other big question, and that's who's going to be the starting quarterback there? There's been an assumption written in pencil that it's going to be Alex Orji. I truly believe they've got a competition up there. Davis Warren, Jack Tuttle, they've got a shot, but I think it's Alex Orji's to lose, and that's how I look at it. That's not feedback from the program because he's more dynamic than they are. There are tools he has that those other guys don't have, but it doesn't matter if there's not good decision-making and there's not consistency. Michigan's not a program that needs 40 per game to win. They're still going to play the same kind of defense they've been playing there for a while. Decision-making, being A-plus in that compartment, that's what will win you that quarterback position. Texas had a lot of churn, and yet Texas is right up there. You saw the JP poll, very high on Texas. You saw yours truly here, very high on Texas. Texas needs to find ways to be top 20 against the run. They just need to be a top 20 run-stopping unit. They lost big-time playmakers on the interior of the defensive line. The game control here is what separates teams that can win it versus teams that can just compete for it. There is no gap between you and anyone else if you can't control the game up front. You may be able to win every game, but it's back and forth, nip and tuck, coin flip. They were 116th last year in pass yards allowed. And so the secondary is another focus that you could have, but I'm worried about stopping the run here. And then that goes to the other side of the ball. Then that goes to how much is asked of Quinn Ewers, how much is asked of this retooled wide receiver core. A lot of promise, but lack of proven production at Texas. A lot has to come together. A lot has to come together. Now, luckily, you're not trying to, bubblegum and paperclip your way to an SEC contending season because you got talent there, a lot of talent. It's just there's a lot of unproven. This is college football. That's the way it has to happen. That has to become proven there. Probably a little bit more, I think, than most of the country would assume. Most of the country, I'm talking about the more, not the casual-minded crowd, but just the crowd that doesn't follow it hardcore day to day. They probably look at the odds. They probably saw Texas go to the playoff last year, and they probably think to themselves, okay, like they're a bona fide contender, a whole lot of guys return this year. Well, some of them do. There are big-time players that aren't there anymore. Worthy's not there anymore. Those two on the interior of the D-line, A.D. Mitchell, those guys aren't there anymore. So that's why you put a premium in recruiting, and that's why you put a premium in development. Next up, let's go to, rest in peace to the Pac-12. Let's go to the Big 12. Is Utah really Utah on the line of scrimmage? Because that's how you know Utah. Utah, if I tell you one thing, give me one thing about Utah, you just ball both of your fists and you punch them together, that's Utah football. Well, they're replacing their top two offensive linemen. And they were average at preventing tackles for loss last year. So the Big 12 is a little grittier conference up front than the Pac-12 was. Top 20 defense in sacks last year and top 5 in run D, but they lost their top pass rusher. So everyone assumes, and kind of me as well, that Utah's just a certain caliber up front because that's their hallmark. Are they that caliber team up front? Schedule's very favorable for them. Are they the kind of team that can take over games out there? At Alabama, obviously there's the Nick Saban question, but I mean, we've talked about that for a while, so we can get a little more granular than that. Is Alabama going to be good enough in the secondary this year? Kind of like Texas, there's a lot of talented names, but are unproven, and are going to have to step in and play big time for them. There's a screen right now you're looking at with all the losses they had in the secondary. And so that's one thing. Kane Womack takes over as the defensive coordinator there, former head coach at South Alabama. Over on the other side, Kobe Prentice, newcomers like Ryan Williams, Kendrick Law, Jeremy Bernard. Is there a 1,000-yard receiver in that room? Kalen DeBoer's offense would lead me to believe someone's going to have a shot. But is there one there? What kind of player is Jalen Milroe in that system? Is there a difference maker up front for them in the pass rush? I don't think there's a Will Anderson there. I don't know that there's a Dallas Turner there. Some really good names, though, some former five-star names. Who emerges? It's one of the fun things to watch, especially with these teams that load up on 4- and 5-star talent every year. And then some of that 4- and 5-star talent sort of disappears off the radar for a couple of years. Keon Keeley's a perfect example. Yanze Pierre is a perfect example. These are big-time names from recruiting classes gone by that could all of a sudden explode this year. And you're like, where did they come from? Oh, that's right. Those were 5 stars 2 or 3 cycles ago. They just waited their turn. One more, not to be left behind on the scrap heap. Georgia going to tee it up and give it a good college try this year. What level of defensive line play do we get from Georgia this year? Probably not elite. Will it be good enough? Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Christian Miller, and then a bunch of guys who have promise, but again, are unproven. Is that the kind of dynamic front? Do they have the quality of depth, the versatility of depth, and the dynamic difference makers up front for it to be a vintage Georgia team? Or is it the kind of Georgia team that could still win it all? They'll still be favored in every game, but because they can't take over up front like those championship teams did, they're in a few closer games maybe than they're comfortable with. The tight end room, I think, is still elite, by the way. Lawson Lucky, Oscar Delp. Ben Urasek is a guy we were hearing about when we went up there in February, which was before spring ball. They got him from Stanford. No one knew about him. They wanted to keep it that way. I think you'll know about him before too much longer. Those are some of the things I'm watching. Now, you can comment and you can lead me in different directions if you want to, but there are a lot of questions, which is what makes August so beautiful, because everyone thinks they know. Everyone gets their idea, and then all of a sudden you open up your practice report, you're over on the Big Spur, or you're on Horns 24/7, or you're on any of the websites. I don't care where you go, Auburn Undercover, and all of a sudden you see, wait, the guy that I trusted to get 10 sacks this year is not even running with the ones at outside linebacker. What's happening? It's August. It's August. That's what's happening. Thank you so much for being tuned in. I'm told, and I can't confirm it, but I'm told the pro guys, you may know them as the NFL, they have a preseason game tonight. And some of you have chosen to watch. Many, many more of you have chosen to tune in. And I appreciate, no matter when you tune in, I appreciate that you tuned in. However, because some of you are watching live, I may just hang around for a minute or two after the show ends, at least when I'm done with these pieces of paper in front of me. I may just peruse the live chat. I hinted at this the other day. We got great feedback on it. We've never done it before. I've never just sat here and responded to the live chat. It could be a terrible idea, could be a great idea, but that's exactly what they told me when we hired Jesse, and look how that's turned out. So we will probably take a look at the live chat after the show. Who are the most unpredictable teams in college football this year? Because I think Texas A&M's one of them. The Mike Elko impact could be the kind of impact that for a top 15 JP poll team puts them in the playoff. Texas A&M could do that. At their best this year, Connor Wigman's all the way back from the injury. The defensive front can control games. The talent that you should know is there shows its face, and then there's all of a sudden organization and accountability injected into the program. Hey, A&M could be one of the surprises of the season. However, they're unpredictable because offensive line play, maybe it doesn't improve. They were 91st in rush yards per game last year. Maybe they don't have the quality depth that they need quite yet. Maybe there's a learning curve. Hey, maybe some of these guys that got away with things in the prior administration and don't get away with in this current administration, maybe there's toxicity. That's not anything I'm hearing. I'm just saying we've seen it happen before. And in a year of transition, you could have that kind of variability or volatility even. So I think Texas A&M, you don't necessarily find out anything. Oh, wait, you do, because they play Notre Dame in week 1. Huge game. One of the biggest games of the week in week 1 is Notre Dame at Texas A&M. Hat tip both of you for scheduling the game. Hat tip Notre Dame especially for being willing to go on the road, which they've been willing to do for a long time. But I want to acknowledge it year over year when they continue to do it, because my inbox is going to fill up with people saying Notre Dame doesn't play anybody. Nebraska? Nebraska is a very unpredictable team. Nebraska, on one hand, could take advantage of a favorable schedule. It's been a while since they were even above 500. Colin is showing you right now a slider graphic there. 3 wins, 4 wins, 5 wins. I guess you could say they've trended up over the past 3 years. If one of you sick people want to call 3 to 4 to 5 trending up. But this year feels different. This year, I've got Dylan Raiola, 5-star quarterback coming in. I've got a rock-solid defense. I got a rock-solid defensive coaching staff. My over-under win total, hey, it's 7.5. So we could hit the under and still go 500. But they also, if they get good quarterback play, and if they do take care of business in these games that, frankly, they'll be favored in, they could be a dark horse playoff contender. I don't think it's totally responsible to predict that. But on the high end, you know, if you were to go best case scenario, there are scenarios out there out of a random 100 scenario sampling where Nebraska is a dark horse playoff contender. I mean, they're not going to probably go to Ohio State and win, but outside of that, they can win every game on the schedule here. However, they could still be really bad in one-possession games too. A true freshman coming in, it's a very dicey proposition to be leaning on that. So maybe Dylan Raiola just plays like a normal human, and he has his ups and downs, and there's inconsistency. Decision-making week to week is very, very erratic, and you win some that you should win, and maybe one you shouldn't win, then you drop a couple you should win. The offense is inconsistent, and it was bad last year, and there they are, 6-6, even 7-5. Given the expectation bubble out there, I think would be disappointing. So that is a very unpredictable team. I think Kansas is an unpredictable team. That's the first hiccup of the show, because Jalen Daniels' health is in question. Now, if he shines, then Kansas is a Big 12 championship contender. And they may be able to withstand lower returning production rate. This time last year, we were talking to you, and I was sitting here, and I probably said a million times, Kansas is number one in the country in returning production. It wasn't a lie. They were. They're not this year. So if they don't have that quarterback play, it could be a longer year than anticipated. If they do, then that's the kind of guy, Jalen Daniels, healthy, is the kind of guy who elevates names of guys that you don't know yet. However, maybe Kansas can't just blindly reload. Maybe this is not a program like a Georgia or like a Florida State, where even though you don't know the names, we just blindly count on them. Maybe the line of scrimmage does suffer. Maybe they feel the loss of Andy Koldenicki, who was the offensive coordinator, who's now at Penn State. Can't just overlook that stuff for a major program. You especially can't overlook that sort of thing for Kansas. And that's no knock on them. It's just historically Kansas football sitting here at over under 8.5 wins with those kinds of questions is probably the biggest testament to the quality of a head coach that you've ever seen. I mean, Lance Leipold, stud. Kansas with questions and an over-under win total of 8.5 is amazing. Next up, SMU. Yes, the Fighting Rets, which sounds better than the Fighting Lashleys. No, it doesn't. The Fighting Lashleys. Preston Stone may not miss a beat. That's their quarterback out there. They went 11-3 last year. And so they got him, and maybe they don't miss a beat. They're joining the ACC this year, for those unfamiliar, those of you who didn't follow all the latest headlines in conference realignment. So maybe the offense is still strong. They were 6th in points per game last year. So maybe that's just the way it is again. And the portal additions are all pluses across the board. If that pans out, then they can make some noise. They got Florida State coming in there in week 5. Should be fun. It's a conference game, mind you. Florida State there in week 5. And then back-to-back, although there's a bye in between them, back-to-back road games at Louisville, at Stanford. There's a very, very roller coastery type feel to SMU schedule because they've got FSU in week 5. I don't know if there's a bye week in there. There may be. But this is their 5th game. And then you look the rest of the way and you say, wait, where's the next really big one? Well, at Louisville, the next week is the next biggest one. Because after that, it's Stanford, Duke, Pitt, BC, Virginia, Cal. And I'm just saying, it's normally tough to ramp up from the G5 to the power whatever level. SMU's roster is a little bit different. SMU is not going to have the best roster on the field when they play Florida State. There's not going to be an insurmountable Grand Canyon gap between the two. They're a little different caliber roster than your typical G5 jump-up project. And secondly, that's a workable schedule. So, yeah, you could find yourself saying SMU more than you thought you would in November this year, but there's the downside. That's what makes them unpredictable. The downside is the step up in competition may bite them. The step up in competition, especially when you play in a major conference, and I don't care which one it is, a major conference tests your depth just a little bit more each and every week. And sometimes we'll see teams in September, and then you'll see teams again in November, and some of the same players are even on the field, but you're saying, wow, they ran out of gas. That's correct. You got to have 12 weeks worth of gas just to get to the regular season finish line, and it's harder to do that when you have less former four-star guys running with your twos. At SMU, respectfully, if they got four-star guys, they're running with the ones. Florida State, teams like that, teams like Clemson, teams like Miami, they got some four-star guys you won't even see this year because they can afford to not play them. Sometimes at SMU, when you're where they are in the trajectory of their program, maybe they have to play those guys. Nevertheless, that's what makes them unpredictable. Doesn't automatically guarantee anything. It just makes them unpredictable. And the other team, South Carolina, that I'm looking at in the unpredictability meter, Lenora Sellers could just be that guy. Lenora Sellers, their quarterback up there, who most of you haven't heard of, 6'3", 242 pounds, borderline 5-star guy last cycle. Well, 2 cycles ago. So he was there last year. He'll start for him this year. They've been talking about him since last year. Last year, they still had Spencer Rattler. And yet, our guys at South Carolina kept saying, yeah, Rattler's the guy this year. Sellers is good. And he's going to have a year to just sort of marinate in the system. Wait till you see him. Well, we get to see him now. So maybe they're right about him. Maybe alongside that, they've remade those skill positions. Maybe that offensive line isn't atrocious this year. A lot of maybe there. If that happens, Colin, do me a favor. Throw me their schedule right quick. Because with South Carolina, it's, to me at least, it's never about the biggest games. By biggest games, I mean it's never about the game at Alabama. I don't expect South Carolina to go beat Alabama. I don't expect them, although they would argue, I wouldn't expect them to go to Oklahoma and win. I don't even expect them to go to Clemson and win, although certainly they'd duct tape my mouth shut on that proposition. I'm looking at a game at Kentucky in week 2. I'm looking at Missouri at home November 16th. I'm even looking at Ole Miss coming in there. They got LSU and Ole Miss at home in the first 5 weeks of the season. Snatch one of those. Take care of a game against Kentucky, win a game against Missouri, and then you don't have to beat teams that you're a double-digit underdog against. Can they do that? Well, that's what makes it very volatile, because there is a scenario, obviously, where offensive line's still bad, and Sellers plays very green because he's very new. 7 teams on that schedule are in the top 20 preseason odds to win the national title at FanDuel, and so maybe they're just not as good as any of those 7. And at that point, their over-under win total's 5.5. There's a 5-7 here. There's an 8-4 here. Very unpredictable. I know that doesn't sound like a wide gap. Well, talk about Shane Beamer's future. Talk about how he's perceived. There is a massive gap between 8 wins and 5 wins. They've done both of them over there in the past 3 years. There's a massive difference. Where there's not a difference is me telling you what you should do this time of year in terms of back to school and back to sports, which is a phrase that I've workshopped with Academy, but it's been really working because you guys have been saying it back to me. Academy Sports and Outdoors makes this show free to you. There's no paywall. I don't have to ask you to subscribe to anything that costs you money. I ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, but that's free. The podcast, that's free. That just helps us. Academy Sports and Outdoors, not only are they our partner, longtime partner, just arm in arm, and not only do they have the things you need, I would argue they also have a lot of things you don't even know you need. One of my favorite pieces of feedback that I get on this front is when one of you has never been before, and because you watch the show or you listen to the show, you want to be loyal to our partners, which I appreciate more than you know. You've probably driven by an Academy in your town 100 times. You finally go in, and then you realize I was right the whole time. Not that I would ever mislead you on this. I was right. I was right when I told you they got stuff in there you never knew they had. This is not, all due respect, this is not some corner store circa 1970s mom and pop sporting goods department. This is Academy Sports and Outdoors. You can see these things from space. And you've got everything in there you need, a lot of stuff you didn't know you needed, grilling equipment, baseball bat, camping equipment, basketball goal. You got clothes in there, racks and racks and racks. You got shoes in there. You got all sorts of different things. And they've got our back, so we appreciate them. And if you can't get there in person, academy.com is your hookup. It is that time of year where 2 things happen. The first is my ankle itches. It happens every year around this time. August 1st, itchy ankle. But the other thing that happens, and probably one you look more forward to, is we not only have done our playoff predictions and the JP polls out and our conference predictions are out, which candidly came earlier this year than normal. Not only have those things happen, we like to do specific team predictions. They're really rapid fire. I give you a ton of information, and I'm going to give you the best, the worst, the most likely. I'm gonna give you a lot on their coaching staffs because we got every coach on every staff graded internally here. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start it tonight. I'm telling you, man, I think I got a bug bite on my shin, Colin. And we're not pre-recorded, we're live. So we just gotta roll with it. It sucks. Bradley, bring that cream in here. So I'm gonna do Ohio State and Florida State tonight. Not back to back. I'm just telling you the teams that are coming tonight. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through it all, and by the time I get done with this, you'll know, I think, everything you need to know about these teams from an outsider's perspective. Ohio State, full preview here. Here's what you need to know. Over-under win total for the Buckeyes, 10.5. They got the best odds to win the Big Ten. They've also, at FanDuel, got the best odds to go undefeated, even better than Liberty. And that market has shifted a little bit in the past couple of weeks. They got the number 2 odds to win the whole thing, behind only Georgia. I think I know, with Ohio State, that this is the most talented roster in the country. You could make an argument for a couple of other teams, but I think this is the most talented roster in the country. And the key, I think I know, is in the guys they got to come back. Because while a lot of folks have been focused on the transfer portal additions, they got key players to come back. It reeks of what Michigan had happen the year before. That's not a comparison I know they want to hear there, but in terms of broad stroke, yeah, it is a comparison that I'll make. I also think I know this could be the best defense in the country. And if it's not, it'll be really, really close in any key metric this year. They brought key players back, and then they added the best defensive player in the country, potentially in Caleb Downs from Alabama. And the third thing I think I know is they got Will Howard out of the transfer portal from Kansas State. Will Howard needs to manage. He does not need to carry. That's the luxury of being the quarterback at Ohio State. You have got talent everywhere, the likes of which you may never see again. And you definitely won't have talent edges against your opponent ever again, like you will playing at Ohio State. I don't care if you go on to play 10 years in the league. You'll never have a week-by-week edge in talent like you do at Ohio State. That means you don't have to carry. It's not like Shedeur Sanders at Colorado, where everyone looks to him and says, bail us out, Shedeur. You got to go win the game for us. No one's going to tell Will Howard, you got to go win the game for us. They're going to tell him, you need to work within the system. You got 2 potential 1,000-yard backs here. You've got a true freshman who's an alien out wide at wide receiver, and then you got ones who are already here who are really good. That defense may not give up more than 11 or 12 points a game. Don't lose games. Don't make bad decisions in big games. Don't turn the ball over. That's what Will Howard has to do. If he does that, they can win a national championship. The big questions at Ohio State, how improved is that offensive line? It's the thing every Buckeye fan's checking on when they read practice reports right now. Because you know what they should be able to do? I'm going to use a dirty word here again. They should be able to do the same thing Michigan did last year. Ohio State may have the best defense in the country. Ohio State has got sledgehammer running backs that don't sacrifice athleticism for physicality. They've got good receiver play. They should be able to bludgeon people if they want to, though. But you got to have the offensive line to do it. So should be is the key phrase there. Will they be able to? Does this team have a bully mentality? That's another question I have. That's more a DNA thing. You know, I keep going back to what they should be able to do. Had Ryan Day on the show last week, and I asked him, when you got out of last season and you self-scouted and evaluated your program, were there areas where you said, we've got to change? Which every coach does every year, but I was specifically wondering, if you know you've got the personnel to do whatever you want to do, if you know you got the strength and conditioning and nutrition at your disposal to mold your team into any kind of team you want it to be, do you want to be a fighter jet or do you want to be a wrecking ball? Or maybe just both? There needs to be a little more wrecking ball mentality to that team this year, because there's no excuse for Ohio State to ever be the second most physical team on the field. There's no excuse in the fourth quarter for a team to ever be confident they can just drive on Ohio State and bleed the clock. There should be confidence that Ohio State can do that to someone else. And number 3, when we start to learn more about this team, when we see them a few games in, they're going to be winning because their schedule's favorable early on. But by the time they go to Oregon, are there some specific defensive matchups that some of these teams find they can exploit? There's not going to be a glaring weakness. It's Ohio State. They won't have glaring weaknesses. But like the number 2 corner position, do you find that tight ends can have favorable matchups against outside linebackers? That sort of thing. It's going to matter way more down the road than it would matter against Akron, for example. The coaching staff here is really good. Our internal grades have this as a top 5 staff overall. That is not just Ryan Day. That's down the flow chart from Ryan Day. They've got good continuity. It's top 5 overall staff, and that OC-DC combo is elite. Chip Kelly, we've got him graded as a top 15 offensive coordinator. Now, he's been a head coach for a while, but just in terms of play calling, Chip Kelly's a top 15 guy, and Jim Knowles is way up there as well. That's an elite OC-DC combo. and I'm really looking forward to Chip Kelly this year and what he does with what he has. The schedule overview, it's a very easy non-conference. So unlike Michigan playing Texas in week 2, we don't have that on this schedule for them. They got Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, and then they dive into conference play. So at Oregon, at Penn State, and Michigan is why this is not an easy schedule. At first glance, you look at it and you say, oh, these are layups. Some of them are. Some of them aren't. 2 of their 3 biggest games are on the road. At Oregon, at Penn State, Michigan. 2 of those 3 are on the road, and they also get Iowa week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then they play Nebraska after a bye week. And it's not that I'm telling you watch out, but I'm telling you watch out for those defenses. You know, because if they don't have things rolling offensively, Nebraska can put you in a bad spot. They may not be able to score on you, but Nebraska's defense and Iowa's defense can put you in a bad spot. So those will be good tests for that offense, if for nothing else. Best case, worst case, most likely record scenario here. Surefire, there's a 12-0 in the cards for Ohio State. If everything goes well, if we simulated the season 100 times, there's a 12-0 there. I think the worst they could do this year is 9-3, and I think the most likely record outcome is 11-1. I leaned on 12-0. However, you're not going to have a most likely 12-0 when you got those 2 games on the road. JP Poll's got them at number 2 to start the season. The model loves Ohio State. I got them going 11-1 in the regular season. What we don't do is we don't put every one of your games up on this board behind us and predict which game you're going to lose. I don't think there's any skill in that whatsoever. I've always thought that's kind of a dumb exercise. I thought it. You guys can do it if you want to. However, I do think 11-1 is where I've got them, and then I think they're in the playoff, and I think they probably win the Big Ten and off to the races and could very well win the national championship. They're watching us in Jackson, Mississippi. Hobbs, New Mexico is tuned in tonight, and Corpus Christi, Texas as well. Appreciate you guys so much. One small favor before I ask you, let me check something. I was going to ask you to get us over 50 likes, but we're already over 270. So, you know what? Like the video anyway if you're watching live. And if you're watching the replay, do so as well. And if you've not subscribed, do that. I'm done begging. All right, so the big what-ifs. I got several more things to get to tonight. I got Florida State full prediction. I got some questions for you. Bowl predictions. I'm going to venture into the live chat in a little while, which is something I didn't even tell Colin I was going to do. He doesn't even have elements ready for it. It's fine, Colin. Biggest what-ifs in college football this year. Hey, what if Nico Iamaleava in Knoxville is just a breakout star? Not average, not easing into things. Nico Iamaleava, one of the best quarterbacks in the country this year. He's got the raw physical tools to be that. He's got the head on his shoulders to be that. He's certainly got the system he's in to warrant consideration for that. Well, if he was that, they'd be a legitimate SEC contender. They'd be a playoff contender. Depending on how good their defense is at Tennessee, they would be in the national title conversation. Now, that's lofty. That's lofty. So I'm going to pause. They haven't done that since Philip Fulmer was there. And might I add, I was watching as much practice footage as I could yesterday, and I saw some footage from Tennessee. Colin, I saw some footage from Knoxville. And you'll never guess who was hanging out at practice yesterday. One Philip Fulmer. Just kind of hanging out there, as he has every right to do. It's just always nice to see Philip Fulmer roaming the indoor sidelines in Knoxville. How good is that defense this year? Because if Nico Iamaleava popping coincides with them having, top 20 defense, that's a national title contender. Hope you realize that. The reason I mentioned top 20 is because one of you had one of your bold predictions the other day be that Tennessee was going to be a top 20 defense and have the number 1 offense. They had the number 1 offense 2 years ago. Defense may not be worlds off. Secondary, I have to see to believe. But defense may not be worlds off. Wide receiver, good. Running back, good. Offensive line, question, but I think they'll work it out. So if they have star potential at quarterback, then that team's got big-time potential overall. Next up, as we venture just up the road here in Nashville, just up the road a little ways to Louisville, what if Tyler Shuck is healthy this year? That's a big what if you know him and you know his history, because he hasn't played more than 2/3 of a season ever. But when he's played, all he's done is win. So if I could just get health out of him, that'd be a wonderful thing for Louisville, wouldn't it? Now, here's the problem, kinda. He's a dual threat guy. Therefore, he's not showcasing his full game unless he's using his legs. Doing that makes him incredibly injury prone. That's the catch-22. Now, they were 10-4 last year at Louisville. Offense held them back, though. You know, they could have been better than that. They could have been an ACC championship team last year. Offense held them back. The transfer portal they had to use to revamp, and they did. They got a much harder schedule this year. But if he's healthy, they can be contenders. Now, here's the problem. The problem is, if you dive into their schedule a little bit, I'm a paper pop on this one because this bears close watching. There is something called bye luck, and they don't have it. And that means the two of the best teams they play this year, Miami and Clemson, both have byes before them. They play like 4 or 5 consecutive games before each one of them. So it's not the best structured schedule, but if I get a healthy Tyler Shuck, whomst amongst us knows what could happen there. And then the third question, third what if, is one that is sort of evergreen around here. NetJets, wheels up, I hope you're listening. What if we finally make it to 2 games in one day this year? Now, I'm not talking about one where, you know, there are multiple games happening, like Clemson plays Georgia week 1 in Atlanta. Well, I'm not going to that one and then going down the road to Georgia State at what was formerly known as Turner Field. That doesn't count. We're talking about legit one town to another town, probably a noon kickoff, then the 7:30 kickoff, making it happen this year. It's been a goal. I dropped the ball horrifically 2 years ago. For those who don't know the story, we were at the Red River Shootout, known by no other name on this program, and it was a classic. Caleb Williams took over for Spencer Rattler, and Lincoln Riley's Oklahoma Sooners mounted a fierce comeback, and they beat Texas, and fireworks everywhere. It's great, and you're exhausted. And then you leave the Cotton Bowl, and you've got a decision to make. Because down the road 2 hours in College Station, Alabama's playing Texas A&M that night. Bama's about a 3-touchdown favorite. You're holding a sideline pass to the game. But you're also sunburnt, and you want to get home because you've got a show the next night, and there's a plane waiting on you there. You're sitting at Love Field. And I got on the plane. And somewhere over Arkansas, I watched as Seth Small, I believe was the kicker's name, kicked a game-winning field goal, beat Alabama. The field gets stormed. I'm humiliated as the plane celebrates because everyone roots against Alabama except Bama fans. And I have not lived it down since. I had a shot. I let it go. I let it off the hook that day. Is this the year we can make it happen? There are some candidates. It's still up in the air. It remains to be seen. So those are the big what-ifs in college football this year. There's so many things happening around here right now. I mean, we are in some meetings that we used to make fun of management for being in, but now we're in the meetings. And it's all good stuff happening that you've made possible. And there's all this stuff that I want to be able to tell you, and I can't quite yet. Big changes coming, all for the better. Don't worry about anything. We're not going to be broadcasting from under a bridge. I think it'd be a decent show, but HR is totally against it. I don't think they want to send the crew out there. It's not sending me out there. I mean, I hop freight trains, so I'm under bridges all the time. What a flex that is. But I do mean it. I don't even have to change clothes when I do it either. Let's do the Florida State prediction right quick. Although I'm not going to skim through it. I mean, I'm going to dive in, but we'd like to do these things rapid fire. And then I got a couple of more things to get to, and then I will dive into the live chat. The live chat looks lively tonight. Way more emoji usage than normal. Here's the Florida State prediction, at least as far as we can see it this year. Here's what you need to know. The over-under win total at FanDuel is 9.5 for Florida State. They got the best odds, as we sit here right now, to win the conference, which they did last year. So the market thinks they may very well repeat. They have got 3 straight top 10 portal classes baked into this roster right now. They got the 10th best odds to win the whole thing this year. So they are heavily favored to not only be an ACC contender, but maybe win the conference, maybe make the playoff. And they tasted it last year. And there's a sour taste in the mouth. How about that? You win the conference, you go undefeated, Yet with the way the cookie crumbled, as Meemaw would say, it just made everyone angry down there. I think I know a few things about Florida State. I think I know offensive line can be a strength of this team. Multiple all ACC caliber pieces there. I also think DB is another strength of this team. And there's good young depth there too. Behind the guys who are proven, they got 3 surefire NFL guys, I think, in that secondary. But you got some young cats. Maybe they play this year, maybe they don't play this year. But you know it's not really top heavy. There's a layer of topsoil, but then there's some fertile soil beneath that. That's the way you want a depth chart to look. And I think I know they've got staying power. Sometimes we see teams have a magical season, and then they fail to recapture the magic. I don't think that's Mike Norvell. I don't think that's Florida State. They fooled some people because they leaned on the portal really heavily early on, and people were misguided enough to think, oh, they're just going to be a one-trick pony. They don't really know how to recruit. They're not building a program. They were doing those things the whole time. They just supplemented to get there faster, but they were doing those things the whole time. So it's not an experiment down there. It's a program. It's a really good program, and they locked Mike Norvell up for a long time. So staying power means I think they're going to be in this conversation every year. The big question here is pretty obvious. It's the level of quarterback play that they get. DJ Uiagalelei transferred down there. We had Jonathan Smith on the show last week. Me and Cannell were interviewing him. And then after we got done, we were kind of talking about DJU because that was Jonathan Smith quarterback last year up at Oregon State. And, man, Jonathan Smith couldn't praise him enough. And it wasn't any guarantee that he's going to do anything, but it was just how smart he is, how hardworking he is, how attentive he is, how much he cares about it. Again, does that mean he'll be any better than a 57% completion guy? It does not. But it means he'll maximize whatever he has in him, and he's playing for a staff that I think can maximize whatever he has in him. 14 picks over the last 2 seasons, got to improve on it. Completion percentage, got to improve on it. I think he will. It's just by how much. How good do they backfill at receiver? That's the other thing that kind of goes hand in hand with DJ. Jordan Travis last year had studs to throw to. Keon Coleman's not there anymore. You know, Johnny Wilson's not there anymore. Now, that doesn't mean it's a poor man's roster, but when you look at the next guys up, you probably can't lean on DJU to make them. If you had like Caleb Williams there, he can make receivers. I don't think we're looking at that caliber quarterback. So the names that start to emerge, the go-to guys that start to emerge, it's a big question. There's a lot of young potential. It's just college football. It's not proven yet. The staff overview at Florida State, it's a top 10 coaching staff, top to bottom. That's a big deal. Now, don't overlook that. In the whole country, it's a top 10 coaching staff. And I'm talking about multiple layers. The game day aspect, the recruiting aspect, the development aspect. That's a top 10 coaching staff. Didn't think I'd be saying that a couple of years ago. It's Mike Norvell's offense. Alex Atkins is in there listed as the OC. You would have to convince me that it's not Mike Norvell's offense. It's not him calling him. Adam Fuller there, though, at defensive coordinator. They were top 5 in scoring efficiency last year. You look at his career, and there's some up and down to it, which is to be expected. Let's see if they can be consistent there again this year. Got some good players over there. That's kind of it's a first world problem to have because it's a top 10 staff overall. But that's what I'm paying attention to this year with their coaching staff. The schedule review: Florida State cuts no corners in non-conference play. They got Notre Dame at Notre Dame, by the way. They've got Memphis in week 3. They have got Florida, as they do every year at the end of the season, and they get Clemson, and they get Miami in conference play. So you got it to do. It's not an easy schedule here. However, look at this. If you're listening on podcast, think about how a schedule normally stacks up. It is not like this. Florida State plays North Carolina the 2nd of November, and they're done with conference play. Their last 3 games are out of conference, which is wild. Like, who else plays a schedule like that? It's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's just a weird thing. The best case, worst case, most likely record scenario here. There is a 12-0 in the cards for Florida State. I think there's also a 7-5. If quarterback play is not what it needs to be, if they do regress in their offensive output, defense, if it fluctuates a little bit, it's just 7-5 is worst of worst case. The likely record outcome, I think, for them this year is 10-2. And that's my prediction for them. I got him going 10-2. JP Poll, the model has him at number 9 in the country coming into this season, right behind Ole Miss, right ahead of LSU. You guys can chop that up any which way you want to. But Florida State's right there. And if that quarterback piece pans out, and if those wide receivers develop, and they're maybe above and beyond what you expected them to be, maybe more than just an ACC contender there. Maybe more than just contending to be in the playoff. All right, I got a couple big questions that I want to get to, and then we'll get to bowl predictions, and then we'll just check out the chat over here. Do you think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 5 quarterback this year out at Colorado? Do you think Shedeur Sanders, however you define this, is a top 5 quarterback this year? Because I have a problem with it. I have a problem even gauging it. Some of you asked this. One of you asked this question earlier today, so we threw it in the show. It's not an apples-to-apples thing. If you ask me about Carson Beck at Georgia, if you ask me about any of a number of these guys, Quinn Ewers at Texas, Jalen Milroe at Alabama, they have talent all around them. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have a fraction of that kind of talent around him, so he has to do a lot more. Now, to a certain extent, that's the way the game's always been. Some guys have to do more than others. If you're the quarterback at Ohio State, you don't have to do as much as the quarterback at Indiana. But last year, he was a 3,200-yard guy, 27 touchdowns, 3 picks. But they were the nation's worst run game. Offensive line allowed the second most sacks per game in the country. So it can't get anything but better there. But I don't look at it as, can Shedeur be a top 5 quarterback? I think if I were to put him in Columbus, Ohio, it'd be the preseason Heisman favorite. So if I were to put him in Alabama, if I were to put him at Miami, a lot of those places, that dude would be the preseason Heisman favorite. If I put him at Florida State, he'd be the preseason Heisman favorite. So it isn't whether he's good, whether he's worth anything or not. It's how good's Colorado around him. I don't know the answer to that. So that's one of the great mysteries that this season will start to unveil before our eyes in early September. And who do they play? North Dakota State, week 1, I think it is, Thursday night. How dare they compete against the show, by the way? The next question I have a itchy nose. The next question, and this one's going to impact the national championship picture. Does Notre Dame have enough firepower, not just to compete to make the playoff, but to be a legitimate national title contender? Because that would be a level above and beyond what they've had in recent history. There are going to be 20 to 30 playoff contenders every year, because we're giving away 12 spots. So coming into a season, you may have even more than that. It may be like 25 to 40 playoff contenders, where if everything went right for them, you could see that team making one of the 12 spots. But you're never, I don't think, going to have more than 4 to 8 teams that you could see win the whole thing. And Notre Dame hadn't been in that conversation because Notre Dame hadn't been good enough offensively. They hired Mike Denbrock from LSU. Huge hire. Huge hire. One of the best OC-DC combos there. You got Al Golden, you got Mike Denbrock. Crazy good 1-2 combo at the coordinator spot from Marcus Freeman. They were top 10 in points per game last year offensively. Did you know that? Did you? I don't think many people realize that. But it's kind of like Penn State. Penn State was top 20 last year. In the big moments, could you count on them to score? And likewise, with Notre Dame this year, Riley Leonard is not the passer that Hartman was, but he's a dual threat. And Mike Denbrock just got done winning a Heisman with one of those guys. We're not calling him Jaden Daniels 2.0, but he just got done winning a Heisman with one of those guys. The offensive line probably down a notch from last year. I think that's safe to say. Lost a big-time running back. Should still be able to run the ball fairly effectively. Needs several young receivers to emerge. Chris Mitchell also is a transfer they got from FIU. That's a 1,000-yard receiving type guy. If that stuff pans out, it's kind of one of the fun parts of August. There's a lot of if. If is the word of August. If they were to have that, and you'll see them early. You don't know everything you need to know in that week 1 game against A&M because we don't have a preseason in this sport. But I mean, if they win 30-20, if they went in there and scratched out 30 points against Texas A&M, well, then they may be off to the races. You won't see them play another game on your radar until Louisville 5 weeks later. So imagine how much the line at FanDuel would change on that game based on the outcome of the first one. Speaking of which, FanDuel, the exclusive odds provider of Pate State, and we appreciate them because they keep on boosting this odds market and they keep on putting new prop bets out there. And I'm having a lot of fun looking at them because I've been talking about the playoff. You know, we did our playoff predictions last Sunday night. And that's very simple. Like I have Miami in the playoff. Some of you don't think Miami's going to go to the playoff. Well, that's very easy. All we got to do is go to FanDuel and we can pull up make the playoff and click on Miami and it gives you a yes, no bet. And you can just go bet it. I have for several teams. I'm not showing you my betting slips yet. I will. I haven't shown you the betting slips yet. But if you believe in something and you are so inclined and it's legal where you are, that's how you really back it up. You just go to FanDuel and bet. It's really that simple. And if you don't feel like betting, or maybe it's not legal where you are, you can still go look. It's really fun to look. Lastly, but not leastly on the show tonight, we've got some bold predictions. And then let's just say I were to look in the live chat right now. What's in here? I agree. Oh, boy. Josh is, you know what? Here's why I need to go to the live chat tonight. Jesse, let me read this out loud. Josh's review of FSU is typically superficial. You'd think it would kill him to provide a little more specific content. Well, here's the thing. This is not Knowles247.com. I've got people listening from LA to New York to Seattle to Miami, especially Miami. That's not the kind of team preview that we're going to do. That's not the way that we've ever done it here. So I'm glad I looked in the live chat. I will be with you guys in a couple minutes. I will seat you in a couple of minutes. Boldest predictions, according to you guys, that you would bet your own money on this year. First up tonight, it's a bold one. Jacob from Annville, PA. Oregon and Texas both win their conferences in the first year, and they meet for the national title. So Oregon's got the second best odds to win the Big Ten. Texas has got the second best odds, I think, right now, to win the SEC. So that has to happen. Both of them have to win their conference. But then they both have to make the playoff, have the first round bye, not be lined up on the same side of the bracket, because if they play before the final, then that can't happen. And they have to win 2 playoff games apiece in order to face off in the national title game. And even though these are 2 good teams, you're talking about the 3rd and 4th odds to win the whole thing. To have that happen in that order and to be able to predict it right now is pretty bold. So I'm going to call that a 9.25 on the boldness scale. Next up, Ben in Blacksburg, Virginia. The ACC will have a winning record against the SEC this season. Paper pop for Ben there. I'm going to go ahead and tell you this is a 9 for me. So they've got 11 games. So here's how it stacks up. The ACC plays 11 games against the SEC this year. They need to win 6 of them for Ben's prediction to come true. I got a few games that I just don't think you have much of a shot in. Wake is not going to beat Ole Miss. I don't think BC is going to beat Missouri. And I don't think Georgia Tech is going to beat Georgia. So I'm going to give the SEC a 3-0 leg up there. Okay, then there's this next tier where the ACC will be favored. Virginia Tech will be favored against Vandy, and they'll probably beat them. South Carolina against Clemson. Clemson will be heavily favored there. I think Clemson would win that game, but it's a long way away. Florida and FSU. FSU favored, win 2 of those 3, and you've gotten back to within puncher's distance. Then you got the total toss-up games. Miami, Florida, Louisville, Florida. Is that right, Jesse? Louisville plays Florida? What am I looking at here? Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, that's a K. That's not enough. That's tough. That's my handwriting. Cal, Auburn, Tennessee, NC State. So I'm looking at this, and I'm saying, okay, if we win none of the top ones, then we win 2 of those 3 that we're favored in. Oh, can we win all 4 of these? Are we going to have this come down to Clemson versus Georgia is the question. I think this is tough. ACC's got to thread a needle here. And so because I don't think they will, I'm going to call that a 9 on the boldness scale. Next up, it's the boldest prediction of the night. This almost got a 10. As it stands, it's going to get a 9.75. Adam from Hartford, Wisconsin. Other than the G5 champ, there will be no new teams to make the 12-team playoff this year that haven't already made the 4-team playoff. So the 4-team playoff has been around for a decade. And we have had 15 teams make it. Bama, Clemson, Ohio. I'm not going to name them all. You remember who's made it. I hope you remember Cincy made it. Michigan State made it. Washington, TCU. Those are the ones you probably forget about. Oregon made the first one. So those teams have all made it. Oklahoma's made it. So we're saying no new teams are going to be in this thing. Well, the Big 12 alone gives you a massive hurdle you have to clear. Because remember, the conference champ there is going to be in the playoff. So unless it's TCU or Cincinnati, who have the 10th and 12th best odds, respectively, to win the conference, if it's anyone other than TCU or Cincinnati winning that thing, this prediction is toast. If Utah or Kansas State or Oklahoma State or Iowa State, if any of them, I just skipped right over UCF as soon as we called them the sleeper program in America. If any of them, if anyone other than TCU or Cincy wins the Big 12, this prediction's done. And that's not even to mention Miami. If they made it, prediction done. Tennessee, Penn State, Ole Miss, if they make it, the prediction's done. So you know what, Jesse, you were right. This is a 10. I hate to say it, but this is a 10 on the boldness scale. That's just not going to happen. And you know, it's just not going to happen. Forget it. It's not going to happen. Next up, still bold here as well. This is Millie from Columbus, Georgia. Hat tip to the Bi-City, the Fountain City of Columbus, Georgia. 4 coaches in the SEC are not where they are right now. Now, we had to interpret this. So we're saying by the end of the season, let's just call it the end of January, the end of the 2024 season, 4 SEC head coaches will no longer be where they are. It could mean they got fired. It could mean they went on a mission trip to Africa. Whatever happened, they're not there anymore. I think this counts on 2 of them getting fired. So you're probably counting on like the Napier hot seat not working out, the Pittman hot seat not working out. And even then, you got to have other guys that just leave. Like maybe Brian Kelly says, I'm done with it. Maybe Lane Kiffin takes another job. Maybe Eli Drinkwitz takes another job. I don't know how this is going to happen. But crazier things have happened. So I'm only going to call it a 9 because you never know what's happening behind the scenes. Actually, I do sometimes. That's why I'm only going to call it a 9. Now, this is where we would normally wrap the show up. And you know what? If you want to leave, go ahead. But I do want to just toy around with something that I may do a whole show of down the road. Not replacing our live shows, but I don't ever look at the live chat. And I think I need to look at the live chat more. So I'm going to look over here. For instance, no one takes UCF seriously is the first thing I saw. Well, that's not correct. Colin, if you've got that odds board you had in there for the Big 12, can you throw that back up for just a second? No one takes UCF seriously. Let me tell you, I'm not going to go over all this again. Last show, I gave several reasons why not only do people take UCF seriously, I think it's the most underrated program, pound for pound, in all of Power 4. These are FanDuel's odds to win the Big 12 this year. They've got the 4th best odds to win the Big 12. What do we mean no one takes them seriously? Malzahn just went and got KJ Jefferson out of the transfer portal. We were down in Orlando this past spring. Malzahn sat there and looked me right in my eye and said, "This is the closest I've ever had to Cam Newton." Notice what he did not say. He did not say, "This is Cam Newton 2.0." He just said, in terms of skill set, this is the closest I've had where I can do the kinds of things that I did with him again. How did I become an Iowa State fan, Eric asks. Well, Eric, I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, which tells you nothing. I grew up in Harris County, Georgia, it's north of Columbus, which tells you nothing. Hulk Hogan was a big influence on my adolescence, the red and yellow, and I love tornadoes. So there was a team in Ames, Iowa, that was clad in red and yellow every week. They didn't win a lot, but they, at the time, had a literal bird in a tornado on the side of their helmet. And why in the world they ever went away from that is one of life's great mysteries. But Iowa State was in the middle of nowhere as far as I was concerned. I never thought I'd visit Iowa. Thankfully, I was wrong. But I used to watch them, and it felt like they were playing on another planet. Where's Iowa, Dad? I don't even know where that is. You know what? I like them anyway. That's how it happened. Josh, is the kid who died in Stand By Me live? Mason, I'm going to disappoint you here. I don't think Stand By Me is as great as people make it out to be as a movie. And if there were people in the studio right now, they'd throw stuff at me. I just never... I get it. It's not bad, but it's not on my top 30 all time. And that's with the train scene. So Who will win the MAC this year? That's not for me to say right now because we haven't done our MAC breakdown yet. Odds of a repeat of beating Georgia and Bama in 2024. Timothy, I have no clue who you're even talking about. There's a lot of debate in the live chat every week about how real Jesse and Colin are. And I think some of you are trying to reverse psychology me. You want me to prove you wrong by putting them on air. But Colin borders on witness protection, so I can't put him on air. Jesse, I will put him on air if he'll shave his head, and he won't do that. So neither of them are going to appear on air. And if that means you think I'm lying about their existence, it just means you think I'm lying about their existence. And as for Bradley, and this is a true story, Bradley, the associate, has been on air before. Once upon a time, some of you may remember this actually, once upon a time, this show emanated from a very lonely local television studio down in Columbus, Georgia. WLTZ NBC 38 off Buena Vista Road. Not Buena Vista, Buena Vista Road, as they call it in Columbus. And we had a local late-night college football show called Football Nightly down south before it became Late Kick. And Bradley was a PA, which stands for production assistant. Don't know if he just kind of showed up at the door one day. They let him in. They gave him some food and ended up giving him a job. And so Bradley's a PA, and he works his way up to director. And so Bradley is punching the show. That's what you call directing. Colin's punching the show right now. And Bradley would be in my ear. And unlike Colin, who's a professional, Bradley would just talk in my ear. If I said something he disagreed with, he'd just say, no way. There's no way you just said that. So I have to pull the IFB out of my ear. Well, anyway, Bradley starts talking when Vanderbilt started the season hot. Remember the 2017 year, I think it was? Bama started the season hot because they did every year. Vandy starts the season hot. That defensive lineman for Vandy, who was the size of a Bama tight end, starts running his mouth about SEC ball and how Bama's going to find out about SEC ball the next week. And what did Bradley do? He walked his happy little self in the studio after we went off the air and said, trouble's coming for Bama this week. Trouble is coming for Alabama. And so I say, Bradley, how much do you believe that? And he said, I believe it. And I put Bradley on the show. I put Bradley on the show the week before Alabama went up to Nashville and beat Vanderbilt 59-0. Just beat them into a coma. Body bagging special. Sarah McLachlan, special of the year. And Bradley was never on air again. I learned my lesson. Just because someone says something confidently doesn't mean they actually have any clue what they're talking about. 59-0. So yeah. I have two things to do here. The first thing I have to do is go back to the YouTube page. Secondly, is there any game, like there was a game for me a couple of years ago, we actually took the Every Given Saturday tour up to Manhattan, Kansas. Oklahoma State versus Kansas State, which was a 3 or a 3.5 point spread. Kansas State starting quarterback is out. And I think that we're about to see a classic. I even picked Oklahoma State to win the game. I think Kansas State won 48-0. However, at that point, we had already secured our spot on the show, so they couldn't take me off air. But that's about as bad as I've ever whiffed on one. Like, you think the Washington games last year were bad. No, those were close games. I just happened to keep getting them wrong. But I got that one way wrong. Also, I've got the page pulled back up here. During the season, for those of you who are new, and we've got tens and tens of thousands of you who are new, we do something called Friday Night Lines, which feels a lot like what we're doing right now, except I won't be in a studio. I'll be in a hotel room, and I won't be on cameras. I will be on the iJosh, and I won't be talking about anything that we're talking about here. We'll just be talking about spreads for the next day's games. And what I do is I have the model pulled up, and it has all the games, and it has the Vegas number, and it has our internal number. And we've won money using this thing every year. And so what I'll do is I'll have the live chat going. I'll have the model pulled up. We've already had the Ramen Noodle Express picks for the week, which are our official picks for the week. And those are already established by that time. But what I'll do is the games I'm not betting on, I've still got a number on. And so I'll just look at the feed, and I'll take your questions for about 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll let you know what the model thinks about the games you want to bet. Friday Night Lines is awesome. Management knows nothing about it. Management's already in bed by the time Friday Night Lights happens, or they're several martinis deep at some party that we would never get an invite to. And it's raw, it's gritty, it's off the grid, and yet it's really one of the best things that we do around here. When is the week 1 stop in the tour announced? That's what AJ just asked. I think in the next 2 weeks, because I'm going to announce the name of the tour very soon. I'll probably announce the week 1 destination when we announce the tour name. I just decided on the tour name 2 days ago, and I sent the white smoke up. You saw it if you follow on Twitter, at LateKickJosh. Where can I learn more about Saban's process-oriented mindset that has been so influential on you and Pate State? He's got a book called How Good Do You Want to Be that I thought did a pretty good job in describing it. Harold asks, advice for not making a girlfriend mad by watching football all day. Well, do your job the other 6 days of the week. Do your job the other 7 months out of the year. Harold, it's called equity. You got to build it up. And also in the dating process, this is a filtration process. So honestly, and make sure she's not watching. Let me give you time. Okay. Look, if this is the kind of girl that's going to have you put your best foot forward Sunday through Friday, only to then throw something in your face at the last minute Saturday and then play the classic "is football more important than me" game, then that's not a game you're ever going to win. So Harold, you said girlfriend, you didn't say wife. You still have decisions to make, and I hope you guys get married and go on to live together 60 happy years at least. But if Saturday is a problem, then we got a problem. Probably a good t-shirt idea there as well. Bama's not making the national title game. Well, okay. I'll write that down. Could I talk about Jacksonville State? Asked Chad. I can tell you that producer Jesse thought Jacksonville State was in Florida as of 2 weeks ago. I can tell you that. I know Jacksonville State is in Jacksonville, Alabama, because there was a tornado a couple of years ago that hit a car dealership. Everyone who lives there knows what I'm talking about, and everyone else has no clue what I'm talking about. And it did a ton of damage in that car lot, and we were chasing it. That's why I know. So, oh man, a lot of fall wedding talk in the chat right now. Tell everyone we are not. Tristan made a good point. Earlier today, I should have had Colin pull the tweet up. Earlier today, someone sent me something that really jogged my childhood memory. So back in the day, I'm not 50 or 60 years old or anything, but I think there was something in my childhood that they don't do anymore. I'm pretty sure. The Scholastic Book Fair would go to Harris County Carver Middle School or New Mountain Hill Elementary School, where a young JP once roamed the halls. And they would come in there, and the book fair comes in there, and they have these portable shelves that fold out, and it's all the books, and it's the pencils, and it's all of the stuff that used to excite children. And there was a series called The Boxcar Children. The entire series of books. Goosebumps, The Undisputed Goat. But not too far behind, but a little more obscure, was The Boxcar Children. And the thing about that period of time is you could really get away with pretty much anything in children's literature, because it was the wild, wild west of children's literature back then. The Boxcar Children was quite literally a series of books about these feral kids who lived in a boxcar. Where are the adults? We don't know. There are none of them on the picture, on the cover. It's just 4 kids hopping into a boxcar, and voila, you've got a recipe for a series of books. And I ate every one of them up. And I can't say for sure that it didn't have severe unintended consequences on me socially, because I still partake in that activity today that those feral children were, but those kids were seeking shelter. I'm just seeking a fun Tuesday night when I do it. Boxcar Children. Anyway, so I put that out earlier today on Twitter, and someone asked, should that be the name of our student section at Pate State? And I think the Boxcar Children, copyright notwithstanding, may very well be the best idea for a name for our student section that I've ever heard in my life. So that's a soft yes from me. Again, pending the licensing, because I have no idea who would even own the intellectual property of the Boxcar Children. The Boxcar Children themselves have probably long since been lost to the foster care system, but the actual IP, kind of like the IP of the Southwest Conference, like who owns it? Maybe something we need to look into. Nolan, will I reunite the rivalry with Brandon Walker? The thing about a rivalry is the other guy has to win for it to be a rivalry. So I'm not sure I would call that a rivalry as much as, a loose acquaintance. Although I will say this about Brandon Walker. He texted me the other day, and he had some really good Twisters takes. He fired off about 10 or 15, and I either agreed or respected every one of them, and that's rare when he fires off a text flurry on me. So Brandon Walker temporarily in our good graces here. It won't be long, though. Best game this season, Scuba Steve asks. It's tough to look past. It's tough to look past Ohio State at Oregon. I think USC at Michigan is really sneaky good just because of the helmets and also because of what it could indicate. Like Lincoln Riley and in his team that's very unsure of itself up front defensively going and playing Michigan. If you're not sure of yourself physically up front, that's the last place on the face of the earth you want to be. Going to Ann Arbor, Michigan to face Sharon Moore's team or Jim Harbaugh's team. I don't care whose team. Brady Hoke-led Michigan would give you trouble if you were shaky on that front. Jay said, am I going to a Georgia game? Yeah, I probably will be. I don't know which one yet, but I probably will be. Roger, what's your favorite song off Rumors by Fleetwood Mac? Dreams. Dreams was their most popular song, but Dreams is my favorite song. It's just a crime against humanity that Silver Springs was not put on Rumors. A crime. Still the best album, in my opinion, of all time, and it's missing one of my favorite songs ever. Still get mad at it, and I wasn't even born when they put it out. When the decisions were made, I was not even born. Yeah, this is a good point that just got made here. FSU versus Clemson this year, that's DJU facing his former team. Yeah, I was thinking about that the other day. Am I excited for SummerSlam? Kinda. I used to watch pro wrestling all the time. I don't so much anymore. I have acknowledged that the product has seen a very, very noticeable uptick in quality lately. I am going over to producer Belchie's house Saturday night, and it's a couples thing. Yes, SummerSlam date Saturday night. Don't know how it's going to go. May bail out 20 minutes in. May stick around for the whole thing. Got to see what's going to happen with Rhea versus Liv. Got to see it. Am I going to an FSU game? I think so. Again, we choose where we're going to go 6 days before the game. So it's not like I lay out, like a concert tour schedule or anything. I have some games I think we'll be at, more so than others. But yeah, I think we'll be at a Florida State game. I have not been to a home game at Florida State since the Clemson game in 2016. Whichever one Clemson came in there and won 35-31. That's the one I was at. Haven't been there since then, and I really want to get back. Bud asked about gas station recruiting wars. Very, very soon. I mean, gas station recruiting wars has been quiet publicly. It's been insane and unhinged behind the scenes because if you're just tuning in, here's what happened. We do ad sales differently here because we do them ourselves because we actually like to have partnerships. I don't load the show up. We say no by the dozens and dozens and dozens to companies that want to give us money to advertise on the show because I don't want it to look like a stock car. Also, I hate listening to shows that have 15 ad reads in them. So I don't want to make this show like that. So what we wanted to do is we built the show and then we scaled it and then it did massive numbers because of you guys. And then I wanted to partner with some companies that were basically one of us. Academy Sports and Outdoors, one of us. FanDuel. The folks who came to me from FanDuel knew more about the show than I did. So we partnered with them. Well, the recruiting process for the gas station recruiting wars just started with me saying, I like all these gas stations. We should partner with one. And they all started to recruit us. Thus, the gas station recruiting war commenced in the spring of 2024. So Racetrack was a finalist. Love's was a finalist. Quick Trip was a finalist. And Pilot Flying J was a finalist. Buc-ee's, Sketch Athlete, never even showed their face. And so Buc-ee's is temporarily dead to me. Their loss. I think they're still doing okay, but their loss. And behind the scenes, we've been meeting with the marketing and sales departments of each of these places. And what I have done is I have told them, we want free gas. the audience. I want to be able to give you guys free gas. That's really the long and short of it. Because as I promised you, any kind of partnership we enter into, I'm doing it with you in mind. So we give out all kinds of Academy gift cards. FanDuel will have all kinds of promotions with them. But if we partner with a convenience store, with a gas company chain, we are getting free gas out of it. Well, I've got good news. Multiple of the Final Four were willing to go above and beyond on that front. So now we're in the fine-tuned sort of finish line down the stretch process, and I think it's wrapped up. And you're going to like where we go with that, is all I'm saying. You're going to like where we go with that. Do I like Creed? Creed Bratton or Creed the band? Either way, it's a yes. Yeah, Cody, look, I wanted Casey's to come to the table. We're a good breakfast pizza, but we never really heard from them. Chad said gas, gas, gas. I assume he means petroleum. Free gas is crazy. No, free gas is a very good thing. Okay, look, here's what we have to do, because Colin's got to get in bed, and he's got to cut the show up. This was fun. I think it has potential. I think it has solid potential. So we will do this again. Who knows, maybe Sunday night. We will do this again. We'll be a little more formal about it. I'll let you know it's coming. And live chat Thursdays, though, during the season could have some potential. We'll figure it out. Until then, thank you guys so much. Number one across the board right now. Thank you for that. There's no limit to what we can do with the show, with you guys participating in the way you participate. Bring 5 of your friends. Make sure they're subscribed to the pod and the YouTube channel. For producer Jesse, for director Colin, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your weekend. We'll see you back here Sunday night. Take care and God bless.